Welcome to video number 7 in the course where we are learning about software as a service field. And in this video we are going to discuss two important concepts, validated learning and feedback loop, which are both thinly connected with the lean startup approach. So let's take a look at the definition of validated learning. It is defined as a continuous process in which a vendor executes an initial idea and later on measures it to validate the effect. This definition of a validated learning is telling us that we should have with our development sort of 3 stages. And this is a very practical approach so that the entrepreneur has an idea and builds a product or a feature around it. The second stage should be that this entrepreneur measures the effect of this innovation, of the development. How successful was it among my customers and let's say maybe even my investors? The third stage should be the validation of it. Once when I have the results from the measurement, I should sort of react to them. I should take some action. So the third stage is accomplished by any entrepreneur, especially when it comes to software as a service. Every vendor has ideas about the innovations and expansions of the product, the upgrades that can be made. So that phase is sort of accomplished by anyone. Now, when we are getting to second phase, well, there it starts to be a little bit more tricky. You have to know how to measure the effect of your development. And many entrepreneurs do not see this as a simple practice. But the reality is that when talking about software as a service products, these products are internet based, meaning things are online, and once the things are online, we can have great analytical tools to really see how customers interact with our product. Literally, the customers are using the product via the web browser, and maybe the most basic tool that is used to sort of examine this interaction is Google Analytics. Probably all of us have heard about the Google Analytics. So you see, when the software as a service product is online, you really can use these tools to examine the interaction. And as well, even just having a web page where there is your product offering, so your company web page as of a software as a service startup, you already there can collect a lot of data about how successful are various features of your product. So let's say that the original product of yours was consisting of 20 features. Now you have added the feature number 21 and you would like to see how successful is it among the customers. So on the web page you will make your product listing with all the features described in a way that some of these analytical software are able to recognize how much time people spend on reading the description of various features. And the features that are being read the most by the potential customers seem to be the ones that are the most valuable to them. So the measurement of effect of your development and your innovation is a very important point. It's a second stage within the process of validated learning. The third stage is the validation of the effect. So these your measurements have shown some results. They generally can go in one of the two ways. The results can sort of give you some positive results that this implementation that you have made, this development was successful and appreciated by your customers, or they can show some negative results and some negative patterns saying that your customers were literally negative about this development, or they were sort of neutral. And that's also a negative result for you because you have invested some resources and you expect your customers to maybe give you more of the revenue or maybe to be more satisfied generally with your product. And while they are keeping neutral, well, then you again lost your resources. Those resources were wrongly invested. So you can have one of these two. Now it comes to the entrepreneur itself, maybe the CEO of this software as a service company. It often happens, and it is in our very basic human nature, that we can fall in one of the two biases. One is called the escalation of commitment. Often the entrepreneur or the CEO, his commitment to the idea, to the development is so big that even though the results are negative, the measurements show some negative patterns, the commitment of this entrepreneur is going to escalate, saying that no, I really was right, I must have been right, I'm going to invest a little bit more into this new feature, and just then the customers will understand it and they will start to like it. So escalation of commitment is some sort of a trap or a bias that that entrepreneur can fall into, and so that the entrepreneur will fail in this third stage of validated learning. The second bias that occurs is called the ego defensiveness. So let's say that this idea about the development and innovation came from the CEO, from the entrepreneur himself. Well, what can happen that when the results are negative, the initiator of this idea will try to defend his or her own ego. He will not be willing to admit that he did something wrong. Again, this is part of basic human nature and we have to be aware of it. So in that case, the team should really try to sort of psychologically persuade the entrepreneur to admit that he or she did something wrong. So as you are seeing, these are the three stages of validated learning as a continuous process which allows us for a proper product development. Validated learning is very relevant practice, especially for software as a service startups, the young companies who have a very limited amount of resources. Because when this validated learning is properly executed, it will allow you not to waste your resources. And that's the point when we are getting back to the lean startup approach, while we are trying not to waste the resources that we have. So that when you will properly execute the validated learning, you will go the right direction. You will be developing the features that really matter for you, and especially they matter for your customers. So validated learning is considered to be part of the whole lean startup methodology. Now we are getting to the second half of this video and we are going to discuss what we call a feedback loop. And as you will see, it really builds on the idea of validated learning. So when you will search for the phrase feedback loop on the internet, you will see a lot of alternatives and a lot of variations to it. Well, these variations have something in common, and those are the three stages of the feedback loop. And these are build, measure, and learn. Well, and now the variations are stemmed essentially in the direction in which we should spin around this feedback loop. Either we should go the direction build, measure, learn, or we should go the other direction, learn, measure, build, or maybe we can go measure, learn, build. Well, let's take it from the beginning. The original idea was really building on the validated learning, so that at first you should build something, then you should measure the effect of what you have built, and from these measurements you should learn something new. And because of the fact that we are talking about the loop, now when this first loop is executed, then you start all over again. So you build something small, you measure the effect, you learn something about it. If it was successful, then you continue with the iteration of this your product. So you again go into the build phase and you expand this your development, and again the measurement and the learning, and until the point that this process works well for you, the measurements are showing some positive results, you should keep spinning into this direction. If the measurements and what you have learned show something negative, then you should execute the termination of this loop and you should try to go somewhere else. This was the basic idea. But in recent years, the developers of Lean Startup approach started to think about this loop in a little bit different way. And their proposition is that you should go the other direction. First phase is learn, then we have measure, and finally we have build. Well, how is it possible to measure something that is not existent? Because you just want to learn something and you already should measure what you want to learn. Well, it's a bit tricky idea to grasp, but this understanding presumes that one first need to decide what is desired to be learned. So instead of executing the idea, we decide what we would like to know, what knowledge about our customers and about our market we would like to acquire. When we are decided about what we want to learn, we will develop a measurement how this our hypothesis can be accepted or rejected. So for instance, if we have an idea about the feature that we would like to implement, instead of building it, we rather try to examine the general behavior of our current and potential customers on the internet. So again, we will use some analytical tools and we will develop a specific measurements that will gather the data and allow us to see whether they would appreciate or not this our planned feature. Well, it's tricky to imagine this in a real world, but there was a guy who has actually built a company around exactly this. He was able, his name was Steliefti, and his company was about scalable sales. It was some 10 years back. He had a team of salespeople that startups could have hired to be a salespeople for them. So these salespeople were very experienced. Now, what he was able to do is that when some potential new software vendor came to him and said, "Hi Steli, well, I have this idea about the product. Do you think that it can be then sold to the customers?" And he was like, "Well, sure, let's test it." And what they did is that the product was not even existent, but Steli's salespeople made the phone calls with the potential customers and they sort of were faking that the product is existent just to learn whether this product would be accepted or not. And it was amazing practice because in some cases the potential customers said like, "No, I wouldn't ever pay for this." And in other cases, and it's a story that Steli, you can see him telling this story on a lot of presentations. He was able to sell sometimes the product even without the product being existent. So you see, it is possible to execute the feedback loop in this way. At first you decide what you want to learn, then you develop some measurements and measure it, and just from these results you will decide whether you will build or not this product or this feature. So those were two another crucial concepts that are thinly connected with the lean startup approach and that are very useful for software as a service vendors. And I'm looking forward to see you in the next videos.